So yeah, I'm American. We're all about clickbait titles. So I think I'm so happy to be following that talk. So my point of view is basically the junior person's way through this type of research assessment. So I'm a postdoc at the University of Aberdeen at the Center for Health Data Science. That's my Twitter handle. And I gave a full-length version of this talk a couple of weeks ago at Portsmouth Reproducibility. So if you'd like to follow along a little bit more carefully motivated series of arguments, the slides here are on open science. So the title is Organizing Ourselves for World Domination. Basically thinking about how can we, people with almost no power, so we don't run ref, we don't sit on ref panels, but we're getting assessed, or our bosses are getting assessed with our research in something like ref. What can we do to change the way our work is assessed that much better aligns with our values? So I'm going to assume that if you're here, you agree there's a reproducibility crisis or a research waste crisis. And we talk a lot in these open research working groups about how can we individuals fix these problems. And I agree very much with the methods that we learn together and that we're training others to use. So I'm devoted to this better way of working here. I love registered reports. I'm obsessed with open code and data. I think it's the absolute right way to work. But I think as individuals, I'm certain it's better for science. I'm not at all certain working to these standards that give us science that's not false is better for us professionally. And that's what I'd like to think about. And that's what I hope after this talk, we in open research working groups can go on to talk about in more detail. So the first question is, how do you get a job and how do you get promoted? You want to do research for a living? It's worth knowing how it works behind the scenes, how the sausage is made in terms of getting and keeping an academic job. And this quite literally is how you get and keep an academic job. You need ref 3-star and 4-star publications, and you need to win grant money. If you do this, you will have a thriving career. You might have to teach a little. You don't even have to be a good teacher. If you meet these standards, this is how you will progress. And I know that's not the intention of things like ref, but how it works out on the ground is this is how it works. So the rubric in my department includes the number of ref 3- and 4-star internally measured publications I have per 5-year period, and an amount of grant money that's scoped to my grade. So sadly, for our poor early career researcher in his reproducibility meeting, none of these metrics get measured or rewarded in your typical ref-centric measurement of research assessment. So here's our friend Immanuel Kant, moral philosopher, and he says, you can't tell someone they ought to do something unless they can possibly do it, right? And I just think we can't do better science. There's no way we should be held to a higher bar, or we should teach students to work to a higher bar, really, if it's dangerous for our careers to work to that bar. So what do we do? Oh, so I guess what I should say is I'm a bit tired of thinking about what individuals should do. And I think we should talk a lot more about what institutions should do. And Dorothy hit on that quite a bit. And I take this picture and this quote from a discussion of climate change, where basically whether or not I compost my banana peel after breakfast makes no difference to climate change when oil companies exist and behave the way they do. So once you start going to open research working group meetings, reproducibility, UK Reproducibility Network, reading these reviews, put on your glasses of who's getting blamed in the language that's used, even if it's subtle, and think, is it the individual scientist or is it the way, the system in which they work? So I think it's very dry, but it's an excellent source. So you're like, okay, Butler, this is what you say, but evidence here. So there's more references in that longer presentation that I gave you the link for. But a fascinating study for the UKRI, the funder in the United Kingdom, the Research Integrity Landscape Study that just came out a couple of months ago. They surveyed individuals, funders, publishers to talk about why research integrity was poor, what motivated it. And the response, this massive survey, took months. The top 5 incentives for poor research integrity, for bad research, were And think about this. Institutional workload models, so what your job wants you to do and how quickly. Promotion criteria, what they're going to give you a promotion for. Metrics that they measure your research by, like journal impact factor. League tables that they themselves are measured by, and bullying. So none of these are individual problems. Like, I don't cheat on my microscope slides because I want like fame. I do it because I think I'm going to get fired if I don't produce more quickly. And so I think, especially when you're young and enthusiastic and optimistic, it's worthwhile making sure that you have this in the back of your mind. It's not you, it's the system, it's the water we're swimming in. So that was grim, but I'm actually pretty optimistic. I think I've been following this for a couple of years, sort of at a distance. And I think even within that time, I've seen a sea change. So we're here, you know, there's a lot of really active grassroots organizations that are working on this. So, and I do think there's things that even we ultra junior people can do to make a change. And my hero is Tressie Cottom, an American sociologist. And so she's worth reading. Anything she's ever written is worth reading. We're not trained to think about power and power structures. We're trained to think about like key values. So we need to go elsewhere to get informed about this stuff. And Dr. Cottom is a great start. In a recent podcast, she talks about how in 2014, Black Lives Matter activists knew they wanted to make change, knew they had no power to make change, and so decided to just stand for small local elections like Parent-Teacher Association and community groups across the US. So they were in place to make the changes that have been happening this year around defunding police. So listen, it's not the same situation, but I take that plan of action to heart in thinking about us. So 3 steps: rally together. I think we, as a grassroots organization, we really need to work together and decide a political goal and focus on it. And then support each other, ourselves and other people like us, similar values, similar lack of power, to take little slivers here. So the good news is, the work has been done. We are rallied together. There's 100 reproducibility groups. This is astonishing, all over the world. All junior peoples, students and everything. There's 56 UKRN local groups, often overlap with open research working groups here. So these are all mostly early career researchers getting together and training each other and others. So I just think we need to add a political flavor to this work that's already ongoing. So I think a good first goal is improve how our research is evaluated. I think we should debate what a good first goal is, but I think it's an obvious starting point. Something that I think you can get overwhelmed with is thinking, I can't make any changes. I'm not in charge of REF. I'm not a chaired professor at Oxford. What can I do? Power for us is really tiny. I think especially junior people need to feel empowered that they can make change. And it's a matter of getting informed, meeting people. And I think a huge positive way of thinking about power, so not I'm grabbing power and making decisions. I'm making friends, finding people with similar values as me, and I'm helping them. Here's things I heard about how Wellcome is changing how they're funding to improve research culture and that sort of thing. So thinking about how to get informed. We often, as researchers, as early career researchers, we put our head down and we grind on our own projects. I, in particular, just didn't care at all about how the institutes where I worked ran. I don't feel fully invested in them. I don't have a long-term contract. Until a couple of years ago, I didn't know what a Senate was, governing body. So I knew some of the smaller institutional committees, but not big picture, the organogram of my institute. And I think it's really worth knowing, and it's not hard to figure out. It's on the internet. And then I think you should ask, so that I could show you the rubric of how research is assessed for promotion at my university. Maybe maybe you're a student and it doesn't matter to you. Just ask. Say, I'm thinking about career development. I'd like to know how research is assessed for a young academic. Same with what Dorothy was talking about, these internal pre-ref scoring, ref scoring exercises. How do you assess rigor? How do evaluators assess rigor? Is there a rubric? Is there a standard? Is it done double? So good to know. And something else I'm interested in is the declaration of research assessment. I won't go into it now, but go on their website, find out how they're hoping to change research assessment, and see if your uni has made this political declaration that they'll follow DORA's guidelines. And then just find out who decides these things. You don't even have to contact them, but it's nice to know who's doing what at your institute. And then, like I said, little slices of power. I think it's important to be visible. Even when you're super, super, super junior, make a website and look outward as well to other grassroots. I love research culture Twitter. Good-hearted people working hard for no glory. So I think getting onto Twitter and following along there, you don't even have to chat at first. Joining these grassroots organizations to get peer support outside your university can be really helpful. And I think just literally meeting people, other people who have similar values that are junior, but also those senior people. So if you're anywhere near Oxford, see if Dorothy will chat with you. Sorry, Dorothy. But the idea that you can reach out to people who are quite a bit above you on the ranks and say, I just wonder how ref works. Could I buy you a coffee and you could walk me through it? And then once you have that background, you have a little bit more footing to say, I'd really like to join the research directions committee at my institute, me or someone like me. Could we have a postdoc on that committee? And I think that's a way to sort of get embedded to make change. So my final slide here. I think we should have open research working groups need to have a political agenda, or none of us are going to have any jobs. Like, the academic enterprise is on fire right now. I mean, the idea that a third-year grad student will be able to eventually become a professor is like 0.5% chance just now. And how can we help support people doing good work to stay in academia? And so it's just questions I want to end on. Do you think this is a good first priority for open research working groups and grassroots groups? Is it too broad? Should we just try to get all of our institutions to sign DORA? Or should we try to change and get REF to recognize things that we care about? And then who could we find to help mentor us through this process? I think is really important. So I'll end there.